Sometimes you don't need a reason to kill, at least it can be fictitious. Criminals who choose their victims purely for fun or the pleasure of killing are rare, but they are fondly remembered for the brutality and bloodthirstiness of their atrocities. In the state of Missouri, USA, there is a city called St. Joseph. It is a small town with many parks, museums, and other attractions. There are a large number of jogging paths and places for walking. In one of the parks, called Hook, a man went for a jog on Sunday, October 16, 2016. However, this workout was strikingly different from the others. Near the end of the path, out of sight, the man noticed something suspicious on the path. He assumed it was a mannequin because he remembered that the day before had been Halloween, and such an object on a nighttime path didn't seem unusual. The holiday was approaching, so the athlete continued jogging calmly. As he approached the object, he noticed blood on the dummy. However, it wouldn't have been difficult to paint over. At first, the man simply kept running, but something alerted him and made him come back. The mannequin looked suspiciously like a real person. There was a hole in the chest area and the entire body was covered in blood. It was the body of a young woman. She may have been a minor. She was lying naked in a pool of blood on the sidewalk. The horrified witness called 911. Even after contacting the dispatcher, he wasn't sure it wasn't a mannequin. The incident occurred in mid-October, 2 weeks before Halloween, a time when one can encounter all sorts of strange things. Perhaps it was a Halloween prank or a holiday decoration. When police arrived at the scene to investigate, the witness's worst fears were confirmed. It was indeed the body of a young woman. The perpetrator hadn't even bothered to cover the evidence of his crime. Just 1 meter from the body, pieces of clothing were found that turned out to be cleanly cut. Furthermore, the girl's fake nails were scattered around the body. This suggests that she had fought back desperately and all of her nails had been damaged in the struggle. Upon examining the crime scene, forensic experts were unable to find any identification documents. The girl had no personal belongings, means of communication, or the murder weapon with her, which would help them draw any initial conclusions. The first step was to determine the identity of the victim of the brutal massacre. The only thing that could help the police was a T-shirt stating that she was a student at Central High School, class of 2017. It was assumed that she was a senior preparing to graduate the following year. The victim's fingerprints were collected, but no matches were found in the national database, which was not surprising given the girl's approximate age. It is unlikely that she committed the crimes. The authorities were forced to close the park to the public for the next 24 hours to further search the area and identify the victim. A major operation was launched, involving many additional police officers. This operation was successful. The broken pieces of the cell phone were found relatively quickly. It had been broken and disassembled into several pieces, which were scattered around the area. Over the next few days, the communication device was reassembled and fully recovered. Meanwhile, the coroner performed an autopsy on the body. This revealed that the girl had been brutally tortured before her death. Her throat had been slit twice, but that wasn't even the cause of her death. She received multiple stab wounds with a knife-like object, one of which pierced her liver and caused fatal bleeding. Without emergency treatment, a slit throat could have also resulted in the high school student's death. There were signs of prolonged strangulation on her face, but it's difficult to say what exactly was used since her throat was slit. The coroner suspects it was some kind of long piece of cloth. At the same time, several officers visited the school listed on the girl's T-shirt to identify the missing high school student. At the school, the officers spoke with the principal and teachers and were shown photos of the unidentified victim. The girl was recognized. The victim's name was Kaytlin Root. She was a student there for a while and then homeschooled. Kaytlin Root was born on November 11, 1998 into a large family. The girl had 5 sisters and 5 brothers. She was very positive, artistic, and funny, and loved to sing, dance, and be outdoors. Her last hobby was Pokemon hunting in the park, which was very popular at the time. However, not in the park where the body was found. She usually went for walks in Geit Park. Everything there was familiar, cozy, and safe for her. It was unclear what drew her to Hook Park, which was located in another, unfamiliar part of the city. It had been nice and quiet there, too. It had been a favorite spot for many runners until this tragedy occurred, however. There were also some remote and gloomy places where the locals rarely ventured. And that's exactly where her body was found. She had several close friends at school. The loss of Kaytlin was a real shock for them, so the teenagers willingly cooperated with the investigation. When the Root family learned that their missing daughter's body had been found, they were heartbroken. Now they were desperate to find out who had so brutally murdered the victim, who was 3 weeks shy of her 18th birthday. Although Kaytlin had a close relationship with the entire family, she was no longer living with them at the time of the incident. She had grown up and wanted more independence and freedom, so she temporarily moved in with her friend Crystal, who lived with her grandmother Sheila. Crystal's mother, Tabitha, lived nearby. She must have been in constant contact with the girl and could have noticed something suspicious. Police officers went to the house to speak with all the residents. The family with whom Kaytlin was staying at the time noticed her disappearance and called the police. However, the victim could not immediately be connected to these people when they were identified. Police officers spoke with Crystal's family and finally obtained their first valuable lead. According to her mother Tabitha, Kaytlin had an online argument with her boyfriend Mike just a few days before the crime. She had actually wanted to break up with him, but the situation got out of control and a heated argument ensued. The woman reported that the last meeting with this boyfriend ended in a fight, after which Kaytlin suffered a bruise. This bruise was also discovered during the autopsy. This gave the police their first suspect to speak with. It wasn't possible to get to him immediately, but several of the young man's friends came forward. They all didn't believe Mike could hit Kaytlin. As he wasn't prone to aggression and violence, he hadn't previously noticed such behavior. Nevertheless, the police wanted to speak with him personally. They gradually found witnesses who had seen the young man's car. The car was allegedly parked near Hook Park late in the evening, which strengthened their suspicions. Eventually, the police met with the friend. The belief that Mike had something to do with it was immediately confirmed, as the young man had numerous small wounds on his body and hands that looked like scratches. However, he stated that they were marks from branches he had sustained while riding his motorcycle. The boy said he had met Kaytlin, and the last time they had seen each other was on Thursday, that is, a few days before the murder. The young man's friend had also come to the office that day. Everything was fine. According to him, the girl spent a lot of time with them, and there were no conflicts. Therefore, it was very unpleasant for him to hear that 2 days after this meeting, he received a call from an unknown person accusing him of beating women. The voice sounded threatening. The caller offered to meet with him and beat him because of this girl, and then simply hung up. The friend didn't understand what this meant. He thought something had happened to Kaytlin. He immediately called his girlfriend. Although there was no argument between them, the boyfriend was surprised when Kaytlin also blamed him for the broken nose. After that, she simply hung up and ignored the rest of the calls. Any accusations of aggression and cruelty, especially when it came to hurting his girlfriend, the man considered absurd. Mike then posted several posts on his social media page accusing Kaytlin of malicious acts. He believed she had instigated her friends and was plotting against him. The young man couldn't understand what this meant, and he simply didn't have the time to find out the details. It's worth noting that the man had an alibi for almost the entire Saturday and Sunday afternoon. He had visited several of his friends since early morning, and all of these meetings were confirmed. There was no sufficient time frame for an attack. Despite the suspicions, nothing substantial could be discovered against Mike except for the name of the next young man in question. The young man told investigators about Adam. In return, Kaytlin told him about him. According to the deceased, this man was literally obsessed with her. He was behaving so disturbed that he began stalking her. He sent her ambiguous letters telling her he would take his own life if she didn't meet up with him. Eventually, the police tracked down a man whose behavior was truly concerning. They managed to discover that Adam had last communicated with his best friend via social media around 8 p.m. on October 15th. He had planned to meet up with her. To the police's surprise, it turned out that this best friend was the late Kaytlin Root, who had complained about the young man's stalking. Adam added her to his list of best friends, likely to avoid highlighting his unhealthy attraction. Before meeting the new suspect, investigators decided to gather more information about him and interviewed his closest friends. They discovered that both Kaytlin and Adam had gone to a party on the night of the murder and were allegedly spending time together there. Adam was with a few other friends. Witnesses were found who saw the entire group leave late that evening. The girl was with them. Several participants in the gathering were certain that everyone was going to Hook Park, where the body was later found. Remarkably, the young people returned without Kaytlin and told everyone that she had just left with unknown persons. But this all seemed strange and out of character for them. When they checked the suspect's social media pages, it turned out that he began posting strange messages the day after the murder. Adam didn't specify what he had done, but clearly regretted some of his actions. When questioned, however, he insisted that he had nothing to do with the crime and that the post was about something else entirely. Instead, he told the police his version of events. According to Adam, as Kaytlin left the party with the rest of the group, she received a message from a friend named Amanda. After a few brief messages, the friends agreed to meet up, to go to Hook Park. According to the new suspect, he told his girlfriend from the beginning that it wasn't a good idea to meet someone so late at night, especially not in a park he didn't know much about. Nevertheless, she ignored his advice and left. Adam insisted that he was just friends with Kaytlin. He had no conflicts with her. He also considered the allegations of stalking and obsession absurd. He showed investigators their chat history, in which they found absolutely nothing suspicious. The rumors about his obsession with Kaytlin were obviously greatly exaggerated. According to the young man's confession, the last time he saw his girlfriend was not far from where they were spending time with friends. She got into an SUV which picked her up, presumably by Amanda. Adam saw the car for the first time and didn't know who it belonged to. She wasn't recognized by the rest of the group at the meeting either. He insisted he thought Amanda had something to do with what had happened to Kaytlin. Strangely, this story was immediately confirmed. Several witnesses among the young men who had attended the meeting had also seen Kaytlin get into an unknown Santa Fe SUV, and Adam had stayed with them. Adam seemed very upset, even visiting the deceased's family and offering his condolences. Everyone believed he was sincere about this loss. He willingly helped the Root family cope with this devastating loss and even assisted Kaytlin's family with the funeral. Further investigation confirmed that Kaytlin had indeed been in contact with a certain Amanda. When investigators spoke with the deceased's father, it turned out that the man knew all of his daughter's close friends well, and there weren't many. Amanda was among them. According to the man, she and Kaytlin had a complicated relationship. The teenagers were good friends. Then they argued and downright hated each other. It turned out that both Crystal's best friend and her mother, Tabitha, knew her. They both considered Amanda a very unpleasant person who left a bad impression. This is how the police became aware of Amanda and decided to meet her. She was arrested and subjected to interrogation. Amanda didn't immediately disclose all known information about the case and even reported that Kaytlin was not dead but missing. From the beginning, Amanda acted as if she had no idea what was going on. According to her, she neither called nor saw her friend on that fateful night, as Adam and his friends claimed. Their last conversation took place on Saturday afternoon. She even provided her social media account to the police so investigators could verify her statements. She used the pseudonym Amanda Panda without photos. As it turned out, there were several such impersonal accounts in Kaytlin's contact list. Amanda continued to deny having communicated with or met her friend on Sunday and even provided an alibi. She reported that her neighbor Tina could confirm that she had spent the entire evening at home. The police officers verified the information they received. The woman immediately confirmed her alibi and stated that she had seen Amanda in the house several times throughout the evening, including at the approximate time of the attack. They had crossed paths and met several times, which ruled out her friend's involvement in the crime. Amanda had no intention of going anywhere as she had spent the entire evening at home in her house clothes. After this confirmation, the police were forced to release her. All possibilities were explored, but nothing yielded results. The investigation reached a dead end. The story became so convoluted due to the many people involved that things got out of hand. So the police accessed the victim's cell phone to search for clues. This is how they succeeded. Investigators were able to access the gallery and find the last photo taken before the brutal attack. There were no people in the picture, but the frame showed the facade of a store that investigators were able to locate in the city. It was located about 5 kilometers from Kaytlin's apartment. Based on surveillance footage of the storefront, a vehicle resembling Amanda's SUV was located. As this photo was taken, a dark-colored car pulled up to the store and a man with a limp got out. He bought some snacks and immediately drove away. Unfortunately, this did not yield any clues as the store employees could not remember anyone and the image was too blurry. Police officers were forced to further examine the deceased's cell phone. They were able to determine that Kaytlin had communicated with an individual named Amanda Panda. However, it was a different account with the surname Dowell. Based on the correspondence on this account, it was determined that Kaytlin had communicated with this individual on the night of the murder. A brief conversation took place between them. They agreed to meet for a smoke. As it turned out, this account was used by a young woman named Amanda Bennett. This was the same Amanda who had caught the attention of the authorities, and she likely had multiple social media accounts. She was a 17-year-old who was, at the time, in a serious relationship with her 18-year-old boyfriend, Sebastian Dowell. Police went to the address where the young people lived. They immediately found a dark Santa Fe SUV, similar to the one recorded on the store's surveillance cameras, which Kaytlin had filmed before her death. The evidence regarding the couple was enough to make them prime suspects. Amanda and Sebastian were arrested. They provided an alibi, which, however, could not be immediately verified. It was decided to take them into custody and confiscate the vehicle and cell phones for investigation. Investigators interviewed the young couple separately. When they spoke to Amanda, they didn't tell her how far the investigation had progressed, but simply decided to reconstruct the chronology of Friday's events. This was a clever move. The police were actually interested in Saturday and Sunday. If Amanda remembered Friday well but then said she couldn't remember anything about Sunday, it would have seemed suspicious. This is a trick police often use during interrogations to catch a criminal. She described in great detail the Friday evening she spent with her boyfriend and their 2-month-old baby. The difficulties began when she was asked about Saturday afternoon. Suddenly, she started to say that it had actually happened on Saturday. She had just mixed up the days. Sebastian, meanwhile, was also having trouble. He couldn't remember what he had done with his girlfriend in the past few days. His words were increasingly inconsistent with the story he had already told. It seemed as if Amanda had prepared for this meeting with the police but was a bit confused. While her boyfriend hadn't had any time at all, he couldn't even say anything about the film, which, according to Amanda, they had seen together in the cinema. She described it in detail. When the young man was pointed out the obvious inconsistencies in their stories, he became nervous. The police then noticed some cuts on his hands. Sebastian said they were from a cat, but then he changed his story and admitted that they might have been cuts from his knives. The young man had a number of stabbing weapons in his collection. The investigators already knew this. During the arrest and search, several knives were taken from the young man's collection in the hope of finding Kaytlin Root's blood on them. Later, an expert examination confirmed that one of the knives actually contained particles of the victim's blood. During the conversation, it became clear that Sebastian played a subordinate role in the relationship. He confirmed this, saying that Amanda had 100% control over everything that happened and that he was subordinate to her. According to him, she completely excluded strangers from her social circle. He didn't even have friends he could choose himself. In fact, he only communicated with his lover's circle, which included only women. This was also confirmed in the couple's correspondence, as Sebastian complained that he had to ask permission for every one of his desires. For example, he liked to smoke, but only with his girlfriend's consent. She was jealous and rude, and in a fit of rage, she often hit Sebastian quite severely. Once, she even broke his ribs. According to the young man, he feared that Amanda would one day kill him with a knife. The last threatening incident of this kind occurred just a month before the Kaytlin Root tragedy. Sebastian reported that Amanda suffered from some kind of mental disorder that would suddenly cause her to become aggressive. They had seen a therapist shortly before the crime, but the doctor had simply doubled the dosage of the medication she was taking. But Sebastian wasn't so innocent either. His social media page was full of dark posts featuring black humor, violence, and murder scenes. He seemed obsessed with these topics. The young man's story was immediately refuted. He changed his statement and said he had gone to the movies with his lover, but the couple was never seen on the video recordings. There were no tickets or purchase dates to confirm that the young people had even been in the area that weekend. Amanda's story could not be confirmed either. The suspicious couple had clearly lied to the police officers. Although investigators didn't discuss the real reason for the young men's arrest, it turned out that Sebastian knew about the murder in the park. The young man insisted he'd learned everything about it on social media, but he'd already been caught lying. The more nervous he became, the more his story changed. Eventually, he admitted he knew Kaytlin and that they were quite close. Since then, Amanda and Kaytlin had been good friends. She even came to the hospital to congratulate them when the baby was born. At that moment, she spoke warmly about the man's appearance, and this hurt the woman in labor. From that moment on, the indirect confirmation emerged that the tragedy was triggered by the jealousy of the inadequate Amanda. Initially, the friend denied such suspicions, but then revealed that his partner had noticed that he and Kaytlin had complimented each other on several occasions. He continued to deny any romantic relationship between the two, claiming they were only friends. At the same time, he claimed he was not involved in the crime. One of Amanda's friends said she had always been friendly, sociable, and positive. However, after the birth of the child, the situation changed dramatically. Amanda became irritable and nervous, which many attributed to postpartum depression. She also believed that more than just a friendship could develop between Sebastian and Kaytlin. Amanda referred to them very often and was clearly angry. She was very jealous of her boyfriend, judging by her friend's words. The whole thing developed into an obsession with getting rid of her rival. Communication between the investigators and the suspect continued, and it turned out that Amanda also knew many details of the crime that coincidentally could not have been disclosed because they hadn't been published in the media. The conversation transitioned seamlessly to the topic of relationships and the baby, and she even changed her face. When they talked about Kaytlin and Sebastian, it was clearly a sore subject for her, but she pulled herself together and didn't open up. Strangely, throughout the entire interrogation, with the exception of this moment, Amanda had shown no regret or pity for her friend. On the contrary, from the very beginning, she was in a good mood and giggled incessantly, as if she were glad her rival was no longer alive. Given the circumstances in which she found herself, her behavior seemed sinister. The true intentions of the bloodthirsty couple came to light when the police searched the young parents' home. There was a feeling the two were involved in something sinister. There were records of demon summoning, sacrifice, and possession. At the station, Sebastian confirmed that he and his girlfriend dabbled in all sorts of dark topics. However, it was all just a hobby and role-playing, so they hadn't gone too far and hadn't committed any crimes. However, an examination of the prime suspect's cell phones revealed that they had planned the murder in stages. Although the information had been deleted, it was easily recovered. All of this became the most important incriminating evidence against the two criminals. When both learned of this, they abruptly changed their tactics, recanted, and began blaming each other. Investigators assumed the murder was a ritual sacrifice, one of many the two monsters planned to commit. Based on their correspondence and the recordings found in the house, both perpetrators were charged with first-degree murder. Upon reviewing their dialogue, the horrifying truth about this brutal massacre came to light. The murder was indeed ritualistic. That evening, the two sent a text message to 6 contacts from their acquaintance list in an attempt to lure one of the victims into a trap. They likely didn't care who responded. Only Kaytlin Root responded, and that automatically became their punishment. The jurors were shocked by the senselessness of this act of violence, but remained convinced that it was Amanda who initiated the murder and took her rival's life with pleasure. Her fingerprints were found on the murder weapon, and Sebastian likely helped her restrain the victim. Both defendants were sentenced to life imprisonment after this sensational trial. The verdicts were announced on May 5, 2017, and Sebastian Dowell would be eligible for parole after 25 years. This was only possible because the jurors were not convinced that the young man intended to kill. It was assumed that he was the victim of manipulation by his lover. Therefore, the young father was found guilty of second-degree murder. The prosecution was dissatisfied with this decision, but the judge also believed that Sebastian was under Amanda's influence. She, on the other hand, was found guilty of first-degree murder and was denied parole. Kaytlin Root's family was satisfied with the decision, except for Sebastian's parole opportunity. They said that 25 years later, they will attend the parole hearing and do everything they can to keep him behind bars. Thank you for watching and take care of yourselves.